Hello, everyone. Welcome to another forecast. It's Dr. Claire Moon, and we're going to be talking about November 2024, the astrology in particular. So if you're joining me, welcome. Thanks for coming. If you're coming on back, thanks. Thank you for coming back. And sorry for the delay. I don't know why I couldn't find what the issue was. I had to do the whole turn it off, turn it on again thing. So yeah, I got to figure it out though. My mic, it was not hooking up, but now it is. So I guess let me think about what announcements I have. Um, I'm doing all the same stuff. I'm doing readings. I do natal chart readings. So if you like my style of reading today, or you like how I talk about the sky, you can experience that, but I can do it about you. So if you want to do that, you can book on my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. And yeah, pretty much not booked out more than a few weeks, really ever. It kind of just holds steady at like 3 weeks. So usually you don't have to wait that long. Sometimes it's even sooner. You can always email me. I have a sliding scale if the prices are too steep, and it's not going to work. I don't want that to get in the way of people experiencing astrology or getting help from it because it's such a darn useful tool. So you can email me at aligninglighastro@gmail.com, and then we can talk about my sliding scale, which you can find information about at www.aligninglightastrology.com/FAQ, my frequently asked questions, my extensive FAQ section. I am going to increase my prices. I just sent out a newsletter this morning. You can sign up for my newsletter. That's where all the discounts live. And I usually send it out just once a month, around when the sun moves into the next sign. But yeah, I'm going to change my pricing and make it make more sense to me. And I mean, it's going to be a slight increase for some things, but then I'm also going to add some different options in terms of time. So I'm going to have like 45-minute, 60-minute, and 75-minute options for both birth chart and forecasting sessions. So there's way more flexibility built in as well, but it's more of like a set rate that makes sense. Because I'm looking at my prices, I'm like, this just doesn't. The logic is inconsistent. And I'm an Aquarius rising. So like the logic needs to be consistent. Anyway, so that's going to happen. I'm going to update those on the 18th of November. That's changing. I can't think of any other major changes. Hit my actual, I have to add it below. I got to add my link tree. Um, I have some fundraiser things for Gaza, but I guess while we're here, there's the eSIMs that you can donate. That's on my link tree, which I'll link below if for everyone who's listening later. Sorry if you're here right now, the link is not there. But I've got one to buying eSIMs, which is a way to help the communication infrastructure challenges that, I mean, you can actually help a lot of different places in the world that way, but I have a link to one that's specifically to help Gaza. And then there's also, of course, like the tons of GoFundMe's for people. So I have a link to one of those. So check that out if you have the capacity. And in that part of your life, if you don't, that's okay. You can just take care of you so you can fight another day as we are on this long road together. Any other announcements? I can't think of any. I'm going to do a little meditation thing before we really get into it. So I'll name that later if you're into that. Feel free to skip it if you're not. I'll have timestamps. And then I did do some Scorpio New Moon rising sign horoscopes, which I have linked below. So feel free to check that out. You can pause this and go check that out because it's actually the first thing of the month is the new moon in Scorpio. So I'm doing more rising sign horoscopes lately, and I did another one. So that's there, and that's it. Those are my announcements for right now. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're enjoying this, if you're getting help from this. Excuse me. If you want to keep up with this, hit subscribe. Uh, you don't have to tip, but of course it's appreciated. Of course. I did start to monetize these, so I'm thanking people for listening to the commercials. I appreciate you. Girls got to eat. You know the drill. Thank you, though. I appreciate it very much. Okay. With that, I think we can kind of get into astrology. I'm going to talk about the whole month of November. So I am coming back to doing the whole month. I want to do a little bit of reflection so far. But let me talk about the dates of interest here. So we've got on the 28th of October, which I know it's, coming up if you're listening to this live, but not quite November. It's worth noting that Venus is going to get free from Saturn. So that is one thing to consider right now. We've got Venus in Sagittarius squaring Saturn and running into Saturn by this kind of more tough aspect. Now, we'll get into the nuts and bolts, but that all clears up on the 28th of October, after which I think we should be able to enjoy the festive spirit of Venus and Scorpio much easier after the 28th of October. And then on the 1st of November, Scorpio New Moon, go check out the video. Mercury enters Sagittarius on the 2nd of November. On the 3rd of November, Mars enters Leo. On the 7th, Mercury is going to enter the pre-retrograde phase of their journey. On the 11th, Venus is going to enter Capricorn. On the 15th, Saturn is stationing direct as we have a Taurus full moon. On the 19th of November, Pluto enters Aquarius for good. On the 21st, Sun enters Sagittarius. This is like a lot. On the 25th, Mercury stations retrograde. And then we're going to have Mercury disappearing from the evening sky on the 28th of November. So they're going to be visible most of the month. We'll talk about it. And then at the end of the month, on the 30th, into the 1st of December, depending on where you are, we have a Sagittarius full moon. So, wow. That's a lot of ingresses. That's a lot of planets entering new signs. So that's a whole thing. We've got a couple, I guess, so getting into more general notes about this month ahead. Actually, before we do that, let's do old business. But yeah, a lot going on this month. And then as far as what we've had, we had that full moon in Aries, that kind of spicy. It was spicy style. Let's go to it. It was on the 17th of October. I know on the internet, a lot of people were talking about it and it being a spicy time. And I actually looked back at what I said about it last month. And it's funny because I tried to be positive, but the longer I read on it, I was like, no, I don't love it. It doesn't look super fun. It doesn't look warm and fuzzy at all. It was with Chiron. Mars, who's in charge, was just like, they're in Cancer. So, again, I'm not going to get into it. I talked about it last month. But this is something that will carry over into this month is something that was part of that full moon in Aries that we just had. Kind of the tension or kind of the sense of things reaching ahead or reaching a turning point, that Mars-Pluto opposition, that was baked into that last full moon. And we're experiencing that as we move into November. We're going to get to November 3rd, and Mars and Pluto will be exactly opposite each other. But that is one thing that has already been going on. It's definitely here right now. I mean, as I record this on the 24th, we're within engagement range, pretty much within 3 degrees and some change, but almost 3 degrees. And so at this point, yeah, I would expect us to be really noticing like what things are reaching ahead or what like Pluto buttons are really getting pressed on right now. What buttons in Cancer and Capricorn are getting pressed on. And this is where I guess it's helpful to note the best way to use this information today is to know what your rising sign is. And if you don't, that's totally okay. You can pause this, go to Chani Nicholas's website, channynicholas.com. I think that's what it is. I think I might have it linked below. I also like AstroSeek and AstroDienst. Well, all of those are great little chart generators for free on the internet. And go find your rising sign. And then you can kind of get more specific about what areas of life, what house topics, Google house topics, and then you can start to put things together. That's the way to really start to get into the weeds of like, how is this stuff going to affect you personally? I can read for this energy generally, no matter where it is in our life, we're all going to be experiencing it somewhere. And what is that something? Some tension. Mars wants to do stuff. Mars wants to have agency and move forward and act and do. And Pluto can be things that are a bit out of our locus of control. This can be power struggles, power dynamics coming in, conflict around power or power differentials. I've been seeing it come up a lot around me in the lives of people I've talked to. Like it's around. So if you feel like anything is, even like especially with Pluto retrograding into this space and being there for pretty much the third time, like what things in Capricorn especially are like a recurrent thing that is like there's some button being pressed on, like say if you're an Aquarius rising, what about your 12th or 6th house? What about your health, your labor, your daily routines? What about that is reaching a bit of a struggle point or a tension or a pressure point? Or with caregiving or duties, any kind of obligatory things, what is reaching ahead there? Or with mental health, emotional health, spiritual health matters. What is being pressed on there, especially if it's been a recurrent thing with your 12th house topics? So there's ways to get specific for who you are. That's what you pay astrologers to kind of help you do. And here, I'm going to try to give people enough so that they can fish on their own a bit. But that's one way to do that. And that's the best way to use this info. I digress, but that's a good one and a necessary one that I should be doing every month. But yeah, this is something that, again, it peaks on the 3rd of November, this Mars-Pluto opposition. So if you're feeling a lot of tension or pressure around something in the first few days of November, then that's up to you if you want to kind of use that energy and ride it like a wave to like, it's the energy of moving mountains as well. It's like Mars having this injection of power kind of sent across to it, or a really powerful prodding that really has Mars maybe wanting to act or do something. And you can ride that wave. That might be the exact thing you need. Or if you're like, no, actually, I can't do that in this situation, that would be, destructive or whatever, and you don't want it to be destructive, then you can see, well, maybe how will you feel on like the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, or sorry, more like the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, after the 3rd, after that energy starts to increasingly wane. You can check in, see how you feel about those topics then. But that's how I would handle that. And that is, again, kind of bridging reflections of stuff that's happening right now. So you can kind of start getting a look right now. And yeah, see how that's panning out. Before I get into my next reflection point, though, I want to see how everyone is. There's a chat on the side of your screen that you can engage with. You can ask me questions in there. You can talk amongst yourselves, do whatever you like. This is very casual. Come and go as you please. I expect, honestly, I was really last month, I was like, whoa, I got this done in like an hour and 15 minutes. Wild. I don't know if I can do that today because I was just reading those dates of interest and that was just like a lot. So I think we're gonna be here for probably a couple hours. Hello, Sam. How's it going? Very kind words. Thank you. It's very nice. Thank you, Dux Noctis. Nice to see you. Hello, Nikolai. Hello. Welcome. Let's see. Hello, Mandy. Yeah, Mandy Bailey brings up an excellent point that, now the sun is in Scorpio and it just got out of this square, but the sun is still really plugged into Mars. So even though, the sun by degree is out of this T square, it's still experiencing this Pluto Mars thing. So yeah, I completely agree. So, let's just throw in Like if the, topics of the 6th and the 12th weren't enough to play with and think about and ponder about, add in the Scorpio house topics and see, how is that playing into where you are maybe able to act or do something. So let's see. Ah, that's great. Okay. What else? Oh, happy birthday to your daughter. That's fantastic. Another trip around the sun successfully made. I hope the next one is great. Excuse me. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention, I mean, we were pretty much talking about it, but that Aries full moon, it was spicy. I didn't notice that. Like I was just very energized. I had a lot of energy. I think I was just feeling into that moon Mars square. But I noticed around me there was a lot of irritation, like assertions made, aggressions made. Um, it was a spicy time. So you didn't imagine it. It was around the 17th of October. Um, that I just wanted to validate that. That was pretty much it. Sorry, working some frogs out of my throat. Hello, Fallen. It's nice to see you again. Yeah, great, good. Yeah, the Scorpio New Moon episode. Check it out. And maybe that's a great segue to talking about November, because that's really what November starts off with, is that new moon in Scorpio. So I'm going to say a little bit about it here, but definitely go check out that other video. There are timestamps. You can just skip right to your rising sign. And what was really interesting about this, and this is something that we'll be playing with all 2 hours today, is this concept of mutual reception, where we've got planets that are exchanging signs. So here we've got Mars in Cancer, and Mars is in the moon's sign of Cancer, and the moon for this upcoming lunation is in Mars's sign. So it's like two friends that are in each other's houses, and they can be like, "Hey, buddy, where'd you put the whatever?" And you can be like, "Yeah, it's over there in the corner behind the whatever." And they're like, "Wow, I would have never found it without you." And you've got each other on speed dial. It's a trine, so it's a really kind of free flowing by sign energy. Oh, it's water. It's very watery. So I kind of expect, it could be a lot of really internal things for people. It might not be happening out in your external field. It might be happening within you. I'm not sure. It could be subtle, being in water. But that was the most interesting thing about it, was just the really strong connection between Cancer and Scorpio on this Scorpio new moon. And so I think it's not only going to have to do with whatever's closing out, refreshing, whatever's coming open or unfurling, what we do during new moons, it's beginnings and endings. Whatever's beginning or ending in your Scorpio place, I think it may have something to do with whatever's going on in the Cancer place in those house topics. So let's say, like for the Scorpio rising example, maybe something about their beliefs is resulting in a new thing with their identity or their appearance. Maybe, God, I can imagine for myself when I like got, I got more into my body and I had dealt with a lot of like internalized shame that I had, and I started being much more comfortable being like more and more scantily clad, to the point where I was like almost, and pretty much, blue laws specific, as naked as I could be on stage. And how that was like a really big change in belief in my worldview that happened over time. And it really ended up affecting my appearance, my identity, my presentation. So it can be big things like that. It can be smaller things. Maybe you get influenced and you're like, you know what? I've changed my mind. I used to hate bangs and now I love bangs. Like clearly it's the way. And maybe then you get bangs. Dear Scorpio rising, I'm not sure. Um, but that's just one example. I've got the rest and a bunch more in that other vid. Check it out. The other things that are going on at this time, we are wrapping up as we go into November. We are having a really nice Mercury-Mars trine. So the cognitive faculties and the action faculties working really well, the motivation and the planning working really well together. So very much like it feels like a very productive, for the most part, new moon. I think, okay, we've got Uranus and the full moon that we're going to talk about in Taurus is right on Uranus, like within a degree or two. This new moon, I mean, we've got a little bit of distance. We've got about 20, well, 15 degrees between them. So for what that's worth, that's a day's travel of the moon approximately. So, I mean, there's no way that Uranus isn't going to be influencing this, but we are still in kind of this fixed sign territory. So, I don't know, it feels somewhat stable. It feels like because of the mutual reception. And why I said earlier, the moon and Mars, I know a lot of us don't usually think about them as friends or teammates or buddies, but I think of them both as nighttime planets. They're both of the night sect. They're both working, in some rejoicing conditions, and it's a trine. So I think there's some favorable stability kind of things happening here where, look at the Scorpio and Cancer areas of your chart at the beginning of the month and see how you can put those areas of to get together, in a way that's really advantageous. If all of that's Greek to you, just think about what you feel really motivated about right now and like what are you most excited to do when you get up in the morning or when you get done with work, and how can you focus on that in a new and improved way? That's how I would interpret that without any astrologies. Um, Mercury is coming off of a trine with Uranus, which can be kind of breakthrough. I mean, very disruptive, not stable. That's why I'm like, oh, there's these flavors of instability, even though the rest of it feels pretty stable as far as illumination goes. As far as the last few that we've had have just been not stable. Um, but yeah, Uranus is adding a little ray of maybe innovation or doing things in a new way with this new moon, with November just as a month, as a whole month. So if you wanted to do like, people are doing sober October, maybe you missed that train. Try sober November. It's a good time to try something really new when it comes to the new moon. Because again, Uranus is a planet that speaks to novel things, doing things differently. It can be disruptive though. It's not super stable, but sometimes that's what you need to disrupt a really ingrown habit pattern of some kind. Venus is coming into a trine with Chiron at the beginning of the month. So this is good fence mending weather if you need to mend any fences with people, if there's been any arguments or any kind of kerfuffles. This feels very like healing and helpful with relations and relationships, having tender discussions in the first few days of November. Mercury being in Scorpio, being able to have some of those more difficult discussions that feel kind of vulnerable to have. And then seeing Venus with Chiron, adding that sense of like healing and moving through something in a reconciling type of way. That feels really good. And, maybe that Pluto Mars is just speaking to the tension that's in the air about those things. So there might be constructive ways that this is coming out. That being said, really until we're on kind of a wave of weather, I feel like, that leads till November 3rd. So November 3rd, let's go to there. At that point, we're gonna, depending on your time zone, when do they enter there exactly? Yeah, so Mars enters Leo at exactly 10. Oh, we forgot about Mercury. We got to go back and talk about Mercury. But November 3rd, now that I'm talking about it, at about 10 p.m. Central Time. So into November 4th, Mars enters Leo. And at that point, there's going to be a bit of a vibe shift. That is around election day in America. So that's I'm happy to see Mars is coming off of Pluto. Then it feels more like just the tensions that build up before an election. And now seeing Mars separating from Pluto, it's like the election day happens and then that energy gets dispelled because people have done their action. Mars is doing a thing and they've done their thing. And then that energy can start to dispel as we move into November and people can start to think more about other topics for a minute. But uh, before we get too much more into that, we should go back and talk about Mercury. Mercury is entering Sagittarius on November 2nd at 2:17 p.m. Central Time. So that's going to be, if you're like in Hawaii, that's like in the morning. If you are more in like universal time zone or further east in the globe, that is going to be later into the day on the 2nd into Sunday the 3rd. And this is not like, okay, not like last call, but almost last call for doing Mercury stuff. For the first week, we still have Mercury in a part of their cycle where they are not in the pre-retrograde shadow bit yet. That starts on the 7th. So November 7th is your last call for doing Mercury stuff without it kind of getting maybe entangled with the Mercury retrograde. So that, what does Mercury do? They plan stuff, they travel, they buy and sell. So if you're going into the holiday season, not to be like, just be to be strategic with our resources. This is kind of like, yeah, if you can get as much holiday shopping done before the 7th, cool. I know like, okay, there's sales, which are going to help some people get through that difficult season of holidays. So, wait if you must. But yeah, if you can get it done early. If you need to mail stuff, get it done early. What's going to happen is that Mercury is going to lose a bit of their dignity, a little bit of their quote unquote functionality, to be crass about it. They're going to lose that a little bit on the 2nd, but at least they're not yet in that pre-retrograde time. So I'm like, okay, I'll allow it because they're still visible. So they're direct. So overall, like Mercury's kind of in good shape. They're visible, they're direct. That's a great Mercury. And as the month progresses, like Mercury is going to continue to be direct. So, overall, I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, ideally, if I'm doing like electional astrology, I want to cut it off on the 7th of November. That being said, they are going to be direct and visible at least. So I expect commerce to continue to move along. I am very curious how Mercury and Jupiter are going to function this month with this mutual reception. So this is the first one I guess we'll talk about, and then we'll talk about Mars and the Sun. But two planets that are in each other's houses, in each other's signs. Sorry. Mercury is in Jupiter's sign. Jupiter's in Mercury's sign. Two friends being like, hey, where's the whatever, So they're able to help each other out. And then what it really ends up doing in practical terms is it connects those house topics really strongly. So, November 2nd comes around, and then the Sagittarius and the Gemini house topics in your chart are going to really start to, I don't know, maybe even get a little louder just because of maybe the result of that strong connection and them ping-ponging back and forth with each other. And that's going to carry through for most of the month of November. Well, all of November. So Mercury in good shape, but they are losing some dignity. They're visible and direct, but only till, what is it, the 15th? The 25th. So the 25th is like last call, I guess. Let's just, bookend it. The Mercury retrograde on the 25th of November. That is your very last Mercury call. Try to get things out before then, because at that point they're gonna get kind of swept up in it anyway. So you might as well just get it out there. If you then I guess, and if you are at a point, okay, shucks, it's November 28th. I needed to send that package to my nibblings in whatever state. This is my own situation. Yeah, maybe you want to wait then until the last minute. Wait until after December 15th. Mercury is going to station direct. They'll still be slow, but then at least they'll be direct. So I don't know however you want to do that, but that's your time. That's your Mercury timeline. Use that information how you will. And as much as like, okay, I know a mutual reception in general, we talk about that like it's a mitigation. It really helps. And yes, it does. It totally does. But I have just seen too many examples in session with people where it's not as helpful as I think we want it to be, or it's helpful in some ways, but in other ways, it's so inconsistent. And that kind of sense of being in a place that is completely different from your home, essentially being in a foreign land, of some kind, Mercury being in Sagittarius, Jupiter being in Gemini. I have talked to people where they literally just feel like in those areas of life, like say this was an Aquarius rising, kind of extrapolating from examples I've heard, in their friend groups, just not feeling like they quite belong, or in romantic situations, feeling like there's something a little bit amiss. And I can't, deny that or not validate that, because these planets are technically part of their struggle is that they're in a place where there's some kind of incongruence. And I hear that in session. So I don't want to oversell this, because what I see on the ground, it makes me want to not oversell mutual receptions, but they are incredibly important, and they are really going to tie together two places. But the favorability, I think that's a different question. And at the same time, I do think it can act as a mitigation a lot of times, but overall incredibly important. So let's watch it and see like how those Sagittarius and Gemini places are coming together starting on November 2nd, when Mercury starts their time in Sagittarius. Okay. What else on that first few days in the month? Venus, Jupiter are in an opposition as we enter into November. That is, I mean, I know it's an opposition, so it can be kind of like, oh, there's this good stuff here and this good stuff here, and it's hard to reconcile those two good things. And there can be some tension in there, between two things that could be very favorable, but how to hold space for both of them. But it can also just be intensification of Venus and Jupiter types of energies as they come together. It's kind of like a good thing coming together with a good thing. And, maybe those things usually aren't together, like peanut butter and Nutella, but whoa, when they come together, unreal, right? So it could be some pretty cool stuff mixed in here. I know there's definitely, with Scorpio, some more serious energies. Um, Mars Scorpio doesn't exactly strike me as like the fun go lucky, like fire air Venus Jupiter thing. Feels like two very different notes in the sky at this time. So November might be starting and we might be having some really fun things on one area of our life, and just more somber, normal stuff in other areas. Very two note time, the first few days of the month. And at this time on the 2nd and 3rd, so Mars is coming into that Pluto opposition, which is going to complete at 5:36 a.m. Central Time. So 5:36 in the morning Central Time, Mars and Pluto, that opposition is going to perfect, and then it's going to start to dissipate. So the last thing I want to discuss about this time frame then is Mars moving into Leo. And again, that is November 3rd at 10:09, about 10 p.m. Central Time. So really effectively November 4th for most of the world. And then we're going to get a mutual reception between Sun and Mars. And so then we're really going to see a stronger connection between the house topics where Leo is and the house topics where Scorpio is. So for this theoretical Leo rising topics of their self, their identity, their mind, body, spirit, that their general circumstances, which is kind of vague, but it tracks. Uh, that's really going to be connected strongly with home, topics of home, parents, dwelling, land, ancestry, things like that. So watch for how the Leo and Scorpio things in your life are coming together in November. Watch how the Gemini, Sagittarius areas of life are coming together in your chart in November. It's very interesting. We don't usually have kind of these really strong connections coming in and both at the same time. So definitely different notes happening. It'll be interesting to see how it fleshes out. And then I guess let me see if there's anything else I need to say about the Sun Mars. I mean, there's so much I could say, but I guess I I will say they do have contra Antisha. There's a bit more of a connection between these two. In addition to them being like the same modality, they also have other minor sympathies that make even just a stronger connection. So there's several pieces of information here that are just telling us, yeah, Leo and Scorpio topics are going to be conflated, coming together, working with one another, or, thinking about the fact that this is a square, what adjustments are being made with Leo house topics and Scorpio house topics? Where are there changes or pivots that might be happening with those areas of life? If there are any, I mean, the fact that the sun by this time is moving away from Mars, I feel like that downgrades the spice a bit. And it really just becomes this invigorating energy. I mean, both of the planets of vitality are in this configuration. We've got Mars, which is motivation and pure energy. We've got Sun, which is our will and our spirit that moves us forward in life. And they're coming together. So, planets of leadership as well, both of them. So where in Leo and Scorpio are you feeling motivation? Are you taking initiative? Are you getting things done in the month of November? I think it could just feel really powerful. So how can we ride that wave of vitality? And then when the sun gets into Sagittarius, we lose that mutual reception, but then we get a fire trine of these very motivated, energetic planets. So I think the whole month of November, it feels pretty supercharged. It feels pretty energetic. It feels like, and then knowing that Pluto and Mars have that moving mountains energy, that energy to just really get stuff done. The way that the sun is plugging into all that, like moving through this square into like a sextile trine, it just feels very, very energetic. So use your energy to the best of your ability. Um, and yeah, enjoy. Good luck. Cool. Uh, yeah, and I guess last thing I'll say, one last thing. Scorpio and Leo, both fixed signs, having these planets of energy and vitality in signs that also have stamina and endurance, it really is that energy to just like continue to just move through something. Like it feels very powerful. So, um, I guess I can't help but think about like what this looks like in my neck of the woods post election. And I don't know. I hope people are using that energy wisely and not doing dumb things with it. That's all I'll say about it. Uh, all right. I'm going to move ahead a few days. So let's see. Yeah. So once we get to the 6th, we've got this square between Venus and Neptune. So like November 6th, 7th, 8th, uh, people are on notice for dating. It's fine, and it might actually be a very romantic end of the week, like end of the week, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th of November. But like on notice for maybe a week, on notice till maybe Venus gets into very discerning Capricorn. Because they might be illusions. It might be illusory. It might be too good to be true. So watch out because sometimes I feel like squares are just too much of something. It's just like whatever energies are involved, like a square is the energy of Mars. It's just like Mars, like being intense about stuff. So when Venus and Neptune get really intense together, super romantic, ooey gooey. But if it's like too much of that, then it smells like love bombing or something that really burns hot and dies quick. It's just a temporary ethereal experience that we don't hold on to for very long. But if you're out there in the dating world and you're looking for something a little bit more concrete, this is not the time. So if you meet someone and it's really cool and really fun around like this second week of November, um, ride that wave, but be open-ended about it. They're on notice for a minute until Venus gets into an Earth sign. Um, that's what I have to say about dating. Let me see if there are any questions or concerns in the chat. Hello, Yaz, welcome. Oh, okay. Someone about that Aries full moon mentioning that the kids were very energetic. It sounds like. Yeah, there's a lot of energy. I mean, like, and two, that moon Mars square in cardinal signs. Let me go back to it. Yeah, we've got Mars in the moon sign and moon in Mars sign. So here's that strong connection of these two planets and in cardinal signs that want to begin, start some stuff, initiate things. Yeah, it was a very restless. I didn't sleep well. That is for certain. I will say that. And I forgot to mention it earlier. There is a 20-second delay on the chat. So if I'm a little late to stuff, I am on it. Yeah, we're going to talk about Pluto going into Aquarius. That's coming up. Yeah, that Jupiter, someone's saying Jupiter retrograde in Gemini has been like a Mercury retrograde on steroids. Uh, Gemini, they have a Gemini sun and rising with Mercury. So it's hitting all of your stuff. Yeah. And especially if you're like a night chart, Jupiter can be just like way too much of something. And it can be overwhelming. So it really depends on the context. But I've been noticing Jupiter and Gemini being, way just because with Jupiter, there's expansion, right? And with Gemini, there's a multitudinousness, there's like a multiplicativeness of Gemini. It's not just two. And in the Greco-Roman myth, it was two sets of twins. Uh, the women just got written out, like, as usual, classic historians. But in any event, uh, Jupiter in a multiplicative place, you can do the math. It can be way too much of something. So for me, it's been in my fifth and I tend to have a lot of hobbies and I tend to like to learn for fun. That's just how I guess the fifth house Gemini operates. It's like, ooh, information, fun, sexy, tasty. And when now that Jupiter's there, it's just like coming at me, just like, oh my God. Like, it's just there's not enough hours in the day. And it's just like FOMO. It's just like nerd FOMO, like so much. Um, yeah. Jupiter and Gemini, it's great. Get the workshop. It's for sale. Link below. Um, yeah, so question about how emotional the Scorpio new moon will be. I mean, it's one way. Water can be sensing, and one of the things about senses can be, feelings and especially thought feelings. Mercury is there. who loves to label and intellectualize stuff. And let me go to what I'm talking about here. That new moon in Scorpio. Yeah, it's in water. I mean, that's one of the tropes. Yes, emotional, sure. Um, it can be just more of an internal felt sense of things. It can be a deep knowing that doesn't really have words. Um, which doesn't necessarily like sensed as emotional, but like a deep knowing, again, that's just nonverbal. But both Mercury and the moon, I think about in terms of the mind. And, I have a body and now I'm having a bunch of thoughts and feelings. Oh, I forgot to do the meditation. We got to do it. Um, so yeah, if you're having a lot of thoughts, like getting into like thought loops around the 1st of November, just notice if that's a thing and be like, haha, the weather looks like that. Just labeling it. There's some secret sauce in labeling these things. So but yeah, water can be just straight up emotional. It really can. So you are correct. Yeah, yes, asks a great question. When it comes to this Mercury Jupiter mutual reception that we're going to be having, there's a point at which on the 25th, Mercury is going to be retrograde. And Jupiter, who's stationed retrograde, gosh, October 9th, they're going to be retrograde until February 3rd or 4th. So Jupiter's going to be retrograde for a while. They've been retrograde. They're going to be retrograde. Mercury nested within that is going to do a little retrograde. So they're both going to be doing retrograde stuff. And they're going to be doing that until, I mean, Mercury stations on the 15th of December. So for a good month, a good 3 weeks, better part of a month. And I guess the way that I would interpret that would be really doing things double extra different, kind of like overhauling. I feel like the word overhaul, I don't know, maybe that's too intense of a word, but when I just like there's just layers of like saying the same thing. Like you've already got planets having to do things differently in a place they're not used to operating, that they don't have the tools they would choose. They're having to do, more with less. They're not necessarily using the tools that they want to use. So some people will say that that's a disadvantage. I think it certainly can be. It can also make people really interesting and have cool skills, but it can be a tough road. So there's that layer. So let's just say a planet that's having to do things differently because of where they are. And then retrograde planets are often doing things differently. And they're both doing that together. So I don't know. It feels, but the fact that there's that mutual reception, it feels constructive. Like something's working really well about it, or there's a potential for things to work really well about it and to really connect and zhuzh up the Sagittarius and Gemini places in your chart. It's like a refining, it could be like a refining process that really helps to tie the two areas of life together in a better way than it was before. When I think about Gemini, I think about weaving and all of the threads, the individual threads that come together to make a sweater. And Mercury in Sagittarius is like the weaver who's trying to make sense of all of this. And it is like, I mean, I've tried to mend knitted sweaters before and do like the invisible fixes. Um, it really, side note, you got to get the right thread. If the thread is not right, you can do it perfectly, but it won't look perfect. Oh my God, Virgo South Node problems. But this mutual reception, the retrogradedness of it really does feel like the process of like repairing a knitted sweater and like having to undo certain parts and do little things to make it all come together. But the potential for it too is really there. Uh, I guess we're going to talk more about how Saturn plays into this too later with the Sagittarius. What is it? Yeah, the Sagittarius New Moon. or no, the Taurus full moon. I don't know. There's something about Saturn who's like basically throwing in some limitations, some barriers, some like, hey, these are the limitations you have to work around. But again, that mutual reception makes me think, wow, Jupiter and Mercury are really able to problem solve and figure out whatever limitations or barriers Saturn is throwing in there. Yeah. Clytemnestra and who were the two twins from the Mercury from the Gemini myth? I'm gonna look it up really quick. Yeah, Castor and Pollux, but it was actually who were the other two? Clytemnestra was one of them, and then I can't remember the other one. Yeah, if anyone knows in the chat, um, 5,000 space points for whoever knows in the chat who the other Castor, Pollux, Clytemnestra, and someone else. I don't know why I can't remember. Hera? Is it Hera or Helen? Helen of Troy? Maybe it was Helen. Maybe I get 5,000 space points. I'm not gonna spend a ton more time on it though. Okay. I should get back to okay, we did the dating caution around like the 6th through the 9th or so, and then okay, just anyone you meet around the 6th through the 9th, if you're in the dating scape, just watch things for a week or two. And then let's talk on the 7th. We've got Mercury going into their pre-retrograde shadow. So this is the point where Mercury is eventually going to station retrograde at like 22 degrees of Sagittarius, and they're going to move back and they'll station direct again around 6 degrees of Sagittarius. And so, here we are on the 7th, reaching that degree where Mercury is going to come back to eventually. And so Mercury is really retracing some steps here, and we're going to start to get into that area that they will eventually retrace. So put your little antennas up, just be watching, noticing what's going on in the Sagittarius part of your life, what's shifting and changing around, or what's being shuffled or reconsidered or being done differently in the Sagittarius parts. Just keep an eye on that, and that might lead you to what your Mercury retrograde story will be. I can already tell you what mine is going to be. I've started to talk about it, but I am going to rebrand myself uh, into my real name, which like hiding in plain sight, not really. My name has always been up there. But I'm gonna like get rid of the stage name and leave it solely for dance. It was originally for dance. It's gonna go back to just being for that. And I'm no longer gonna be like hiding under the shroud of a pen name, essentially. But I'm going to be figuring that out. That's probably going to be what this is for me. It's my expression. It's my midheaven is in Sag. So it's going to be my public stuff too. So yeah, just watch what things you're going to be reconsidered, shuffled around, and it might be really constructive and helpful. And then again, that 7th of November is your last call for consumerism to go extra smoothly. And then last call, the 25th of November. Until the 15th of December. Let's take a break. I'm going to circle back around as one does. We're going to talk a little bit more about how cool Mercury and Sag is because they do things like circle back around as well. And let's do a little meditation thing. So if you don't want to be in your body right now, that is totally cool. This won't take more than a few minutes. And this is actually one I've done before. But you can go get a snack if it's not your jam. But this is one I've done before, the resting in the gap, the space in between your exhale and the next inhale. So kind of that space in between breath cycles. It's great for the new moon, but it's great all the time. And it's one of my favorite ways of meditating with the breath. And I I have it here from Roshi Joan Halifax's deck again, and it's called Resting in the Gap. And I like to do this, I guess, just my why, because we can get really heady and get in our minds future tripping as we already have. That's why I like to start this way. I forgot. That's okay. Get really future tripping, getting into our heads. And that can get really, depending on who you are, pretty dysregulating, which I know is like the new buzzword, but it's the truth. And this kind of exercise brings us back down. It's much more earth, water instead of being air, fire. Air, fire is up here. Earth, water is down here. So getting more into the body, into the earth, into the water of ourselves, that can be a nice pairing when, the mind can go into all these places like, oh, well, this could happen or this could happen, the anticipation of the future. The antidote to concern about the future is often just being with what is here right now. Because one, we can see what that is. We have certainty. Like this is a mug I'm really holding in my hand right now. So we can rest in that certainty of what is going on right now. Yeah, versus what's uncertain in the future. So anyway, let's rest in the gap. Let your attention rest gently on an in-breath. On the out-breath, relax into your body. Breathe in, letting your body, heart, and mind settle. Breathing out, feel the release. Before your next in-breath, rest in the gap at the end of the exhalation. The next in-breath arrives naturally. And I love that last line too, the next in-breath arrives naturally, because it's that point where I think you can really feel like people say how the body breathes you. Like if you just let it, if you're getting really like hyper focused on the breath and it's starting to become like a barrier to practice, looking at that inhalation and how it arrives so naturally at the end of your last exhalation, like it really is this autonomic thing that our body breathes us. And I think that is such a good place to see that happening. Yeah. And then last thing in our philosophical corner, a little meditation philosophical corner. So resting in the certainty of now versus the uncertainty of a future that even I cannot tell exactly what's going to happen, of course. And then, oh, my thought, it left me. Oh yeah, it came back. And then agency. What is important right here, right now? This was in one of the other cards that now I've lost in the deck, but it was one of Roshi Joan Halifax's cards that at the end of the meditation, it said, what is important here now? What is important right here, right now? And I think that statement really speaks to resting in agency. Okay, what can I do right now to affect my life in a skillful way, in a positive way, in the way that I want to right now? So certainty of now and agency of now. Those are two ways to pair using astrology intentionally with pairing that with like future knowledge of the future, foreknowledge. Because foreknowledge alone, I think if it's not anchored, it can get a little scattery, which is important because Jupiter is in Gemini, which is like the Lord of knowledge getting scattered. Talk about knowledge getting scattered. No offense, but it can there. Because there's just so darn much of it. So thank you everyone for joining me in that fun little exercise. Let's get into the second week of November. So now we've had 2 ingresses. Mars and Mercury in a fire trine with each other. I mean, that continuation of that trine that we're coming into now, really great for any kind of cognitive heavy lifting. And then we get to one of my first, it's that beginning of the pre-retrograde shadow on the 7th, but we get to one of my first mind your own business days of the month. There's a few mind your own business days of this month, and those are generally days where the moon is touching Mars and Pluto. So you'll notice it's when the moon is in the end of these cardinal signs and the beginning of the fixed ones. And so that's around November 7th, November 14th, November 19th, 20th, and November 17th and 28th. So those are the mind your own business days for the month. And it's those days when, yeah, the moon is pinging and it's plugging into that pretty intense Mars Scorpio energy. Now, as the month progresses, as November progresses, this Mars Pluto stuff does start to wane. So really, I mean, the mind your own business days are the strongest, I would say, earlier in November. But yeah, like what we just had the moon and Mars in Cancer together. If anyone was paying attention the last couple of days, how you felt or what was going on around you. That the next time that happens is November 19th and 20th. So, and I know that Mars is going to have gone into Leo by then. I kind of don't care. I think it's going to feel kind of similar because we're still getting that Pluto opposition. We're getting a spicy Mars and a moon that's feeling right into that. So, you can do what you will with those days. You can use that kind of intensity, that move your mountains energy that the moon will be plugging into to get stuff done, to maybe put your nose to the grindstone or really focus on your work and not get involved with others. That is an option. I'm not saying it's not going to be constructive, but spicy. So yeah, I guess too, if you are out there, protesting or doing any kind of activities that are dangerous, those mind your own business days, the 7th, the 14th, 19th, 20th, 27th, 28th, exercise caution, exercise extra caution. Do what you will with that information. Then I'm going to skip ahead. So, well, one last thing before I skip ahead. Just to spell it out. So Mercury on the 7th, pre-retrograde phase. On the 25th, they'll station retrograde. On the 1st, or sorry, stations direct, the 15th of December. I said that. The post-retrograde is done. The post-retrograde phase is done by January 2nd. That is what tripped me up. I was like, is it really January? That seems crazy, but it's not because it's almost November. That's only 2 months away, which is wild. Like I'm going to be looking outside and there's definitely going to be snow by then, which I'm just going to put out of my mind. But yeah, this whole cycle carries us through till January. So there. And then let's talk about Venus moving into Capricorn. So on November 11th, Venus is going to get into a bit more of a chill situation. She's going to get out of a daytime fire sign where she does not rejoice into an earth time nocturnal sign where she does rejoice. At this point, she can see both of her homes by nice aspects, and her ruler, Saturn, is in a place she exalts. So there's a bit of a mixed mutual reception if you do those. And it's kind of like seeing Venus go from fire into earth. And then not only that, but being ruled by a planet who's in water. This just feels way more like chill socializing, or the relations cool off a lot, maybe hopefully on November 11th and onward. Um, I guess, I don't know. I don't have much else to say. I know she's with Pluto. We'll deal more with that next month. Now I'm curious. Now I piqued my own interest. When does she get there? Yeah, that's not till. Yeah, that stuff really starts cooking in December. So we'll talk more about Venus meeting Pluto. But for now, when they do enter into the next sign, they're far enough away. Hopefully, she'll be having other influences first. And then another mind your own business day again, 13th, 14th. Let's take a look at that. So moon at the end of Aries into Taurus. And that is depending on where you are, November 13th into the 14th. And then we have the sun moving into an engagement with Uranus. So this was kind of an interesting thing for the month. About mid-month, we're going to have a few events. So we're going to have Saturn stationing, we're going to have a Taurus full moon, and we are going to have Sun opposing Uranus. So Sun opposing Uranus can often be, it can be battle of will energy. It's like the Sun is trying to express itself in one way, and Uranus is demanding for something to be done differently. And they're in fixed signs. So in general, that change can be difficult. But if there is a wanting to embody the self, really act in alignment, and very congruently, like my outsides reflect my insides, for better or for worse. This can kind of be the energy. So this is where around November 13th and 14th, expression is great. It needs to happen. Otherwise, it gets bottled up, and we don't want that. Find healthy, safe ways of expressing yourself that aren't violent. That's the advice. And violence ranges anywhere from very physical, overt violence to more subtle violence, like with our words. So trying to find ways that are expressive and that let off that steam, but in a way that is hopefully not going to send out ripples of harm even further. And that really heats up and perfects pretty much right after the full moon. So, this is, I'll just say November 13th through to the 18th, like note on the calendar to work out, express yourself, do whatever you need to do to blow off steam in a way that is safe. And that leads us to Saturn station and that full moon. So Saturn stationing, that can look like certain areas of our lives also kind of coming to a slowdown, coming to a halt before it turns in a different direction. Or like a big ship on the ocean, that big slow wide turn that a ship has to make. That's like what Saturn stationing and then moving in the other direction is like. So looking to the Aquarius and Capricorn parts of your chart and seeing, okay, what about those areas that's kind of slowed down and maybe is being reconsidered, shuffled around, and is getting ready to go in a different direction. That would be a ponderable for this. And sometimes when a planet like Saturn is stationing, their significations just get louder. So limitations, especially in the Pisces house topics. So like for an Aquarius rising, this might be around their money. The limitations might be extra loud. The challenges mid-November with money might be extra loud. The barriers or limitations around resources, just having the energy required to do things. That might, the challenge is there. Any challenge with the second might be kind of loud because planets that are stationing can sometimes their things just get more in our face. So watch for that. And then that will, as they station and start to pick up speed in the other direction as we enter into December, then I would expect that influence of limitation, barrier, challenge to lighten up. and the Aquarius Capricorn parts of life to start to move forward and to take shape in that new direction. So, all to say, I would say, okay, we've got this, maybe very individualistic kind of, I want to express myself. I want to embody what I know and understand. And I think Saturn stationing can just add some frustration, some general frustration to the air. Um, I think they can also keep some things on the rails potentially. So that's one possibility of keeping things on the rails, but I think for the most part it's going to be some frustration. And I guess the good news is that Venus and Jupiter have eyes on some of this. They at least have eyes on Saturn. But this full moon is not or wait, no, we got a nice trine. So that's good. So yeah, this actually feels pretty stable besides Uranus. If Uranus weren't there, this would be so productive and stable. Uranus. Throwing a wrench into things. But I guess when I think about like when the rest of the sky does look like this stable in a lot of ways, and then I see, okay, well, if maybe a change could be made and it would actually be very supported. So there could be that Uranus like in innovation or doing things in a new way that's really constructive or helpful, even if it's disruptive or, has that kind of interruptive energy to it. But yeah, like a lot of things make me think that this full moon has potential, but not without some type of frustration. So, um, let's see. Let's talk about this full moon proper. So it happens at 3:28 p.m. Central Time on Friday, November 15th. And this lunation is ruled by Venus, who can see by a trine, so that's great. The chain of disposition is great. All to say, like, it could be a constructive time. It could be a constructive full moon. If you've been working on a project for the last 6 months or the last couple weeks, this might be a culmination of that effort, a culmination of that work. And maybe it's even turning out way different than you expected, but it still might be really great. If you have a thing to release or share, especially if it's like different than stuff you've released or shared before, that would be a great use of this full moon. Anytime Uranus is here and we can channel that energy into just doing things differently, I think it's so helpful. So some culmination, especially with Taurus house topics. So look to that in your own chart. Look to that with the full moon and see, okay, where is this culmination happening with what life topics? The last aspect the moon had was with, what was it? Saturn. The next aspect, visible planet, is Mars. So we go into this full moon like very aware of limitations. I don't think Saturn's gonna like come out of left field and be like, surprise, there's a barrier, surprise, there's a limitation. Um, and it could even be like, hey, we actually, maybe the Saturn stationing direct is the resolution of a barrier, getting over a barrier, getting through some kind of negotiating some challenge. That could be it. That would actually be pretty nice. But I think the presence of Saturn here, I'm not like worried about Saturn surprises or anything. Um, but the moon did just have a conversation with them right before getting full. So moon is aware. They are serious. They are somber. They get it. They're even in a pretty Saturn-tastic part of Taurus. So it's like having a backup plan for your backup plan. uh, okay, we're releasing this thing. We're going to, we're having the culmination of this effort we've been doing. Um, Probably a pretty safe, even if it's you're doing something new, it's like Saturn and Taurus give the sense that it's somewhat safe, that it's not like the wildest thing in the world, and that maybe you have an insurance strategy and maybe you have a backup plan, an exit plan if it doesn't work out. That's what Saturn does. Its next aspect is Mars. So after the moon gets done with having its full perfect opposition with the sun, I mean, of course, it's going to meet all these outer planets. So for the more modern kind of view of things, it is going to hit all these really transformative, big chonky boys. Um, but then visible planet wise, it will get into the moon will get into Gemini and meet Mars by a sextile. And so that's like very feels, especially with some benefic energy here. It's like, okay, this is, that realistic view in the past, and then having that energy to move forward after it. So that feels kind of nice. I dig that. Yeah, I mean, besides the Uranus thing, and I know Algol is there. So we talked about Algol back in July. That was when Mars was with Uranus and Algol. And that was around when Drumpf got his ear nicked. So that was Mars Uranus Algol energy. There is some Algol Uranus energy here. It's not exactly martial. This is a very Venus ruled thing, and it's ruled by a Saturn ruled Venus. So I don't think Algol means it's going to be as spicy as the July thing. I think that's worth noting because it is right there. But I guess to be fair, if you've got planets or placements that are really close to the end of Taurus, where Uranus and Algol are right now, yeah, maybe this full moon is going to be really impactful for you. Maybe it'll be something more important for you than the rest of us. So let me see any questions on the Taurus full moon or that Saturn stationing. Oh, I'm glad I could help with the myth. You guys are so funny. Whoa, and of course Reverend Kai is coming in with like the advanced knowledge. Um, so yeah, the Greco-Roman one, Castor and Pollux and Clytemnestra and Helen of Troy. But Reverend Kai coming in with the Babylonian names, uh Meshlamte and Lugalira. Cool. Very cool. Yeah. And now I'm sure I learned this from Cameron Cassidy. This feels like something that Cameron Cassidy would teach um, about like some of those like older stellar images that were overlaid on the constellations where the twins, the two, that are in the sky that you can see, like, yeah, they look like two little sticks, two things together. They've always been like a pair of something, whether it was a pair of humans, a pair of peacocks, a pair of whatever, it's a pair of stuff. So that's for what it's worth. It's a commonality. That's so fun. I'm gonna have to look that up. Thank you, Reverend Kai, for that. That's so great. Ooh, Amanda Bailey coming in with another, okay, the mind the gap between the exhalation and the inhalation, kind of like at the new moon. They also said also like the space between Pisces and Aries, which I dig very heavily. Uh-oh, which one was the S word? Yeah, Dux Noctis. It is pretty remarkable. Like if you throw in that mixed mutual reception between Saturn and Venus, once Venus gets into after the 11th, when Venus is in Capricorn, yeah, three planets that are sharing some kind of mutual reception thing. It's pretty fascinating. Ooh, Pelem, very happy that you're feeling like like it's landing. Um, yeah, I've got some stuff in that water triangle as well, and I'm an Aquarius rising, so I'm kind of that guinea pig too if you want to watch another Aquarius rising. Oh, Stars and Gamers, I hope you're getting your money back. It's my money and I want it now. That's how I feel. I'm waiting for my golden ticket about my student loan debt. Although part of my own eclipse is like the eclipse cycle going into Virgo and Pisces. Um, that's happening January 17th, but this is my eighth, and I have a Virgo eighth house, and the South Node, a decreasing influence, the South Node, and I'm finally paying off one of my three student loan debt lenders. So the eclipses are eclipsing, they're doing their work, and I did mine. So it's just as above, so below as above. So yeah, hopefully other people are also having improvements in their finances. Oh gosh, yeah, the S word, snow. I said it. Oh no. I know. I'm trying to embrace it. I did not go outside last winter. I'm always talking about how important it is to be outside and like how much it helps my mental health. And do you think that I did it last winter? No, I didn't. So this winter has to be the winter. And I love the metaphor that Yaz just gave of like all those mutual receptions being like a switchboard operator with all like the plugins. It like makes me think of like a modular synthesizer. What are those modular ones where you get all the plugs? Um, yeah, it'll be really, yeah, because it's like if, let me show you what I mean. Because like if I look at like Venus, Jupiter, or sorry, Mercury, Jupiter, I mean, they're really having a two-person conversation with each other. So like very strongly them just going back and forth with each other. And, yes, Mercury is also having a conversation with Saturn. So is Jupiter. But, it's like when Jupiter's looking for resourcing, it's calling Mercury. When Mercury is looking for resourcing, it's calling Jupiter. So I feel like they're like a little pod. And then the Sun and Mars are kind of doing the same thing. Like they're a little pod that are just having like their own kind of special conversation. And then, yeah, I guess later in the month, then we're going to get maybe a third pod, especially if you're like, I think the medieval astrologers, especially, were using mutual reception, like mixed mutual reception. I mean, maybe the Hellenistics were too, and I'm just not aware of it, which is very possible. But yeah, this one too. So this much more intense conversation between specifically Mercury and or Venus and Saturn. So it does feel like all these little pockets of things happening, kind of compartmentalized. So see if things are compartmentalizing. I don't know. That's one way to maybe watch it. That's how I might be watching it, is just see like, okay, again, that doing that kind of legwork of looking up the house topics that apply for your own chart, trying to put things together and see like what things in my life are very compartmentalized. Right. So let's talk about what happens after this full moon. Have any other? I don't think I have any other notes, but it does seem overall pretty darn constructive. And I know that again, Uranus is there and Algol is there with that Taurus full moon, but um, it doesn't feel as unstable as the Aries full moon we just had. It doesn't feel as unstable as eclipse full moon energy. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. Again, that's the 15th of November. And look to the Taurus part of your chart, especially those house topics. What is being illuminated there? So by the 16th, that Sun Uranus opposition is perfecting. So finding healthy ways of expressing ourselves and being individuals and being seen in our own authentic ways. Uh, Hopefully not feeling too held back from doing that in such a way that it kind of leaks out in negative ways. And then Mercury and Jupiter are also really coming into a strong opposition by mid-month. So those themes again of Gemini and Sagittarius are just really going to be tightly coming together at this time mid-month. Uh, and then just thinking about the themes of these planets. So the small details, the larger picture things, and finding some kind of balance between them. Perhaps there's a lot of smaller things that could draw your enthusiasm, but Jupiter is, having to make space. They have to be limited, but they have to make space for a few things. So when it comes to practical advice for Mercury and Jupiter with these house topics, really just do your best to find two or three things to focus on. And if you feel like you're not making progress with these life topics, it's probably because energy is getting scattered or the mind is being scattered. So focusing on two to three things and not eight. So if you're Taurus rising, looking at your money or how you're sharing with others, whether that's sharing time with others, your energy, your talents. You might not be able to be in all the garage bands. You might not be able to do all of the collaborative projects. You might have to really be discerning and be like, all right, I have to choose these two or three opportunities. I have to choose these two or three means of using my skills and talents and leave it at that. And maybe that kind of stuff is really coming into finer resolution around mid-month. Mercury and Jupiter are going to come into 3 oppositions. So this feels like a longer story. When it comes to reconciling, choosing a few things, bringing together the life topics of Gemini and Sagittarius. There are 3 plot points here, and they are the 18th of November, the 4th of December, and the 26th of December. So again, the November 18th, December 4th, and Mercury will be retrograde by that time. So we'll get that double retrograde where like maybe we're really doing something differently. Maybe things are being overhauled in these areas. And then December 26th, that final bit of resolution of whatever that story is. And then again, by the 2nd of January, Mercury getting out of their post-retrograde shadow. So then whatever these kind of re-situations are, I always want to say recombobulating, but not everyone knows what that word means. It's like a very Wisconsin word because of the airport. But recombobulate is kind of the perfect word. Whatever's being recombobulated, I expect it to be recombobulated completely by January 2nd. So give yourself time with these stories, give yourself time with these plot lines. If things get a little messy for a month, that's totally fine. That would be par for the course. Because that's what happens when you like rearrange the living room or something. Like that's what happens. It looks worse before it looks better. And dang it, now I'm remembering because these 3 hit things, we've got a few of them. So I'm actually going to backtrack for a second. I'm going to circle back again. The Mars-Pluto oppositions, those, so people have them. First one is November 3rd. So we talked about that. The one after that is January 3rd. And the final one is April 26th. So, this is where that kind of with the Mars retrograde, picking your battles wisely, knowing that Mars is doing this 3 hit opposition with Pluto, where we can see power struggles, know that whatever kind of tense things are happening, or just really intense energies are happening. There are 3 plot points, and they are early November, early January, and late April of 2025. So, know that it might last that long. If you pick a battle now, it might last that long. Sometimes the battle picks us and we don't get a choice. Well, in that case, if you find this is matching up with the house topics in your chart and you're like, yep, you've clocked it and that's where it is, then you have a clock and you can say, okay, I can check in with this topic again or take extra good care of myself early January and late April. That's how I would use that information. But that was a 3-hitter. And then another thing, and I'm glad if I'm catching you now, like live, we're getting this pretty interesting water trine between Mercury, Mars, and Neptune. And this is something else that has a few hits. At least the Mars Neptune part of it. But Mercury's involved for the first one. So November 1st, I mean, what a time for persuasive speech. I mean, God, now I'm like, God dang it, that really does fit with the election, doesn't it? I mean, that's already been happening, but this is like some extra potential for slipperiness. Um, it's involving places that have to do with devotion and and sacrifice and generosity and sharing and nurturing. And so my kind of thing I'm thinking is around early November, be discerning about devotion, be discerning about who you're devoting yourself to or what causes or what things you're devoting yourself to or what you're being asked for in those devotions. Um, Making sure that no one's taking advantage of a desire for inspired action. You know, if someone's feeling really inspired and wanting to act on that, don't let anyone take advantage of that for any reason, because there can be some deceptive, slippery things sometimes with Neptune that we want to watch out for. That being said, I mean, it is a great time for devoted, inspired action. Uh, Artistically, spiritually speaking, it's a slam dunk. Like, do all the artistic, creative expression November 1st, 2nd. Like, looks great for that. And connecting with spirit, doing actions in your spiritual life, taking actions, planning in your spiritual life, all great. Looks really like good weather for that. But then these 3 hits of Mars and Neptune. And Neptune is in the overcoming position here. And so I want us to be on guard a little bit. So October 28th is the first one. The second one is January 12th. And the last one is the 19th of April. So it's kind of interesting, like when I look at those dates alongside the Mars Pluto, because that's about what's going on at the same time. Neptune's in this kind of trine sextile relationship with those two. So as Mars is going back and forth and opposing Pluto, it's also going to be going back and forth into these Neptune trines. So like it's really powerful for taking action again that is very inspired, inspirational, aspirational. You know, we think about Neptune being this idealistic kind of thing in a potentially idealistic place, and Mars being like, yeah, let's go, let's do it. We can climb to the top of the mountain. I believe in us. It is the energy to do that, but just make sure that whatever mountain you're climbing, that it is the correct mountain first. That's kind of I think the thing. Um, so whatever this unfolding of this Mars story is, whatever the unfolding of the Mars Pluto thing is, um, watch for Neptune, watch for deception, uncertainty, lack of information, deception, anything like the illusions, watch for that, especially end of October into November, the beginning of January, and middle end of April. That's when all of those types of energies are going to be going on. So put notes in your calendar and follow it. Just notice things. Nothing to be, you know, if you're not noticing anything, don't look for it. But if you're like, huh, there's some weird stuff going on in my life, better look at the planets. And then this can be validation like, oh, okay, there could be some lack of knowledge here. Maybe I should get more knowledge before flipping a table or something, just making things up. But okay, so let's see. Mind your own business days on like the 19th and 20th. Um, Problem solving day though, like on the 18th with that Mercury Jupiter opposition. So yeah, lots of pings of 3. I like the Mercury Jupiter oppositions, that triad of things, which again is uh mid November and then beginning and ending of December. Very problem solving. Very able to like mentally, cognitively sort through stuff. So, using information and knowledge for better. So whatever else is going on in the sky, at least we've got that. That's kind of a cool thing, I think, that's going on. But then the 19th, the 18th, mind your own business days, because the moon, again, is going to be interacting with Mars and Pluto, building up to that. And then on the 19th, Pluto going into Aquarius. Finally, for good. Thank goodness. So this is not the first time Pluto has been here. This is what, the third time? And now they'll never be going, at least for our lives, they'll never be going back into Capricorn. So congratulations to all the cardinal babies. You made through it. You made it through. Congratulations to all the people who have Pluto in Libra natally. You have gotten through your Pluto square, and now you guys get to move on to your Pluto trine. So jealous. I'm going into my Pluto square. Now it's my turn. Trines are more easeful. So for all you Libra Pluto babies, gosh, that's like if you were born, I better look. I'm gonna look. Yeah, I guess like early 80s. Early 80s and before. Look at your chart. Just double check. Is it in Libra? Because it's not like the Pluto problems go away. But in a trine or a sextile, it's often easier to work with the Pluto problems if there are power issues or disempowerment, a little bit more leverage with those issues. If there are things out of your control, there's a little bit more leverage with working through them or negotiating them, or even able to turn lemonade into lemons, or see Pluto as having like a powerful impact for cool stuff. So all to say, depending on where it is, this is going to be a different story. This ingress into Aquarius, for some people, it's the end of a tough story. For some people, it's the beginning of one. Because to be real, yeah, the Pluto square. So for those of you who have Pluto in Scorpio, now we're going into the Pluto square, and squares require adjustment. They require change. It's like before we had Pluto even being transformation, it was the square. Squares are of the nature of Mars. One of my favorite examples of this is from Austin Coppock, and he talks about the transformative quality of, taking an axe and chopping through a piece of wood and making something that was one of something into two of something. That's a pretty huge transformation if I ever saw one. So thinking about Mars as a really transformative force and the square as a very transformative force, and Pluto in a square with itself. Yeah, so it's changey. And it's happening in fixed signs that can have a hard time with change in the first place. So there's going to be definitely, especially people who have stuff in early Aquarius or have their Pluto early in Scorpio. Those people might be noticing these types of things first or more intensely first. I guess one example, gosh, do I want to share this example? No, I'm not going to. I might next time. I've already got some, they're kind of gnarly, unfortunately. Sorry, I've got to do some chapstick because like it's been the equinox. It's getting dry here and my lips are so dry. I've got some examples of Pluto coming on my stuff, but they're not happy. And I need to figure out how to say them. And isn't that just going to be my Pluto square? Pluto on my 10th, Pluto on my 1st. How to publicly or just be stuff that's hard to be. And I think Pluto, especially for people who like, if you've got like your sun or your moon or any other point really in Aquarius, like look at what Pluto is trying to change or what new expression is trying to come out from there. And is Pluto some oppressive force or pointing to some oppressive force that's keeping that Aquarius pointer planet from expressing itself how it wants to? Because what I see or what I noticed, I looked at a lot of Capricorn risings who had this happen over the last 15 years since 2008. And so many of the challenges were, just stuff coming out of, kind of out of left field, out of their control, and then having to just be with helplessness in a lot of ways. Uh, and then in other cases, it was where something wanted to be expressed, especially in a first house situation, something about identity, something about the self needing to be expressed. And the more that person's circumstances did not support that expression, or the more that they themselves fought against that expression, the harder of a time it was. Uh, Change is pretty hard anyway. And so the people who embraced that change and went through those things a little bit more gracefully, it was still really difficult, but I did see people do it in some cases more gracefully than others. But some of that is that external support system, and that's a privilege thing. And so that can vary widely. So I don't think it's as easy as just looking at Pluto and looking at it going into someone's place and being like, oh, you're screwed. Um, I think it's more like, well, what wants to come forth here that's new? What wants to unfurl? What's the support system? And then have a conversation about what's getting changed. I guess the last thing I'll say about it for now is just thinking about Pluto having been in an earth sign for the last God knows how many years, since 2018. And now it's going into an air sign. So we've seen Pluto interacting with very earthen things, earthen systems, earthen problems, material kind of situations. God, thinking about some of the decanic descriptions of like pentacles and literal resource management, collection management, and almost like hoarding in some cases. Yep, we've seen all of that. So now what is it for Pluto to move into an air sign? I mean, yeah, still like earthly problems for sure, but now like air is more ideas, uh, thoughts, systems, how we do things, like the edges, where who's excluded, who's not, um, very inside outside, who's in, who's out. And then, of course, all the technology, kind of innovative, what's new, those types of themes. So Pluto's definitely like with air, with Aquarius, still Saturn ruled. That hasn't changed, but there are some shifts in, I think, the themes that it's going to come out as. And I think we will see that personally too. I think for a lot of people, it's going to be shifting how our brains operate, shifting our actual perception, how we think about things and how we take in information and perceive that. Big shifts around that for each of us. But yeah, all ponderables to think about, especially with the house topics of Aquarius. And that's happening on the 19th. So get Saturn stationing, getting Pluto moving into a new place. And I think both of those things, I mean, really be watching mid to end of the month, the Aquarius and the Capricorn parts of your chart, because I think we're going to start to see, with Saturn having station direct with them now, like slowly over December, they're going to move forward. So I expect topics, say this Aries rising, I expect topics of career or friends and groups to start to move forward, and maybe in a direction that it hasn't been moving since June. Um, yeah, since June, because they stationed the end of June. So look to those house topics that are ruled over by Saturn, and then knowing too that Pluto is switching from one place to another in those Saturn lands, and that's also going to shift some things. So very interesting. And then we've got another pair. I said the mind your own business days. So around this time, like the 19th, mind your own business, maybe do work by yourself. Constructive times, but again, if other people are being spicy or weird, okay. If you feel kind of intense or dysregulated, okay, take care of yourself. And then we get to the 21st, and we've got Sun entering Sagittarius, and we're getting this shift from that mutual reception between Sun and Mars and these two planets of vitality to then a fire trine. And then we can see okay, we still got these awesome planets of vitality connecting in a really strong way. So very productive. So really looking at like the fire stuff in your chart and what kind of action moves can you take, leaving things open-ended. So the way to deal with Mercury retrograde during all of this, because the rest of the sky can be really constructive, during Mercury retrograde, often we're learning things that we should have learned before. We're tying up loose ends, maybe going back to projects that we've had on the back burner, things from the back burner coming at us like, oh gosh, that's right, I forgot about that. So it can be a really fruitful time. I would just say, like, yeah, use this vitality to work through any of those loose end Mercury things. And if there are new projects coming in, initiations coming in, keep them open-ended. Just be open-ended about it until mid-December, and should work out just fine. And just know that, like, whatever does start in November, it might take a month or two to kind of wiggle out how it's going to wiggle out. It might not be like a complete finished product right away. And then, yeah, when the sun does enter Sagittarius, then it too is going to have a front row seat for this Mercury Jupiter mutual reception. So our focus is, especially at the end of November, going to be with Sagittarius and Gemini and what's going on in that axis. Similar to what Venus is doing right now, the sun has to contend with this square with Saturn at the end of the month. So that wraps up by the 4th of December. So know that, all right, sun gets into Sagittarius. I know we want it to be party time. It might be extra fun after the 4th of December. Whoops. So at that point on the 4th of December, the sun is going to be past that square with Saturn, and they will be getting less of that energy of rejection, slowness, sadness, loss, melancholy. Might be able to feel a little bit more buoyant after December 4th. On the 22nd, this is our annual moon, sorry, not annual, monthly moon Saturn opposition. So like before 4 p.m. Central Time on Saturday, November 23rd, this is not when you ask for things. If you're getting to be in the 3rd week of November and you need to request something, don't do it on the 22nd. Don't do it on the 23rd. Wait until the 24th or the 25th. Sun trine Mars exactly on the 24th. And so we're going to feel that. I don't know. That's more, sorry. It's more the 26th. So like peak energy, 26th of November. Make sure you're resting as much as you're working. But right before that, we have the Mercury station. So on the 25th of November at 8:42 p.m. Central Time, so effectively November 26th in the more global Eastern time zones, Mercury is going to station retrograde at 22 minutes 40 or 22 degrees 40 arc minutes of Sagittarius. It will be received by Jupiter, who is receiving Mercury, who is receiving Jupiter. And dang, are they going to be having 3 conversations with Saturn too? For Pete's sake. Hold, please, because that might be important for someone out there. Well, hot dang. Okay. So Mercury, Saturn squares. Okay. I'm glad I caught this. I didn't notice this before. So Mercury, Saturn, I'm seeing Mercury in the upper hand position. So I like to see that. That tells me that this is more of just like a serious, realistic conversation that can end up being really positive versus just like pure rejection. But it is more of a serious conversation. And so, or like a kind of being faced with like, okay, Mercury and Sag might be really enthusiastic. Like, hey, I kind of know what I want to do. I understand the what my purpose is here. And Saturn is providing some maybe like strong manning, steel manning, kind of like, okay, well, here's what you need to do to make that happen. Here's the realistic situation so that you understand it. So whatever that kind of vibe is, but this isn't necessarily a day like I was just saying with like November 22nd. Okay, November 12th as well. Not a great day to like request something because there is a tinge of no or rejection in the air. So, don't put in that application for grant funding or whatever, November 12th or November 22nd. The next time they meet is going to be December 6th and then the third, December 26th. So very close with those, really they kind of come as a package deal. The Jupiter Mercury opposition, that happening 3 times, along with the Mercury Saturn squares. There's 3 of them. And it feels really problem solving. It feels really like making adjustments, making changes, but in order to make whatever's there in your life more sustainable over the long term. So it feels like a process that really lasts all of November and December. So giving November and December, treating them maybe like a package deal themselves, that a lot of plot lines that happen in November are probably going to be present all through December as well, and then wrapping up in January. And all of that is going to be nested, kind of overlapping with the Mars retrograde, which we'll talk about more next month. So yeah, this starts to be kind of a more tinkery part of the year, tinkering with our lives, changing things around, doing things differently, and not being afraid of that, hopefully. Okay, we got that. So November 25th, then Mercury retrograde station. Is that correct? Yeah. And Moon is getting a trine from Jupiter. I guess that's nice. On the 26th, for what it's worth. For what it's worth, the Moon is having a nice day. The Moon, so I don't know. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Similar to what I was saying with Saturn stationing and Saturn themes getting louder, sometimes during a Mercury station. So especially around end of November, middle of December when Mercury is stationing, Mercury stuff might get loud. Lots of emails in your inbox, lots of communications, lots of plans and facts and ideas flying around. So yeah, just keep yourself grounded, keep yourself moving slow, one thing at a time, not multitasking too much. I think, this might be fun and furious and fast, intellectually speaking, but boy, could a lot of things fall through the cracks in November. So, have fun with the speed of things, but ride the wave of it, but, don't get caught by it either. Don't let the wave catch you. And then, so end of the month, last set of mind your own business days, more the 27th and the 28th, as the moon is moving into this T-square. But again, at this point, Mars is getting some distance out of the way of Pluto. So that intensity, those power struggles might be kind of waning or not as intense. Things that have felt like they were coming to a head have, or that's calmed down again. But the 27th, 28th, another day to just kind of, either mind your own business or just be careful, protect yourself, take care of yourself extra good. And that leads us into the very end of the month with Venus moving into a trine with Uranus, which is more help in the doing things differently, much more help in now like relationally or telling other people about what we're doing differently or involving other people with what we're doing differently and having it be received nicely. So we get help at the end of November, I think, with if you are making any changes or are some things up in the air. Socially, relationally, we get some help at the end of the month. And then we close things out with a new moon in Sagittarius. And that new moon is going to be co-present this mutual reception that we've been talking about the whole time. We got this injection of vitality from Mars. The ruler of the lunation can see it, direct it, guide it. And of course, we've got Saturn being the serious person in the room, the serious voice at the table. So very strongly involving the Gemini part of the chart, even though it's a new moon in Sagittarius. I think it's going to be involving Gemini just as much. The last aspect the moon had was a trine with Mars, and the next one will be a square with Saturn. So very different than like with that Taurus moon. We came into it kind of safe, careful, steady, and came out of it maybe more energized and looking to the future of action. That was that new moon in Taurus. This, or the full moon. Was I talking about that? Yeah, the full moon in Taurus. Starts serious, ends a little bit more energized. This one's the opposite. We come into it a bit more energized, a bit enthusiastic, excited, and we kind of come out of it with like, okay, but here's the real talk again, or the limitations, or this, or the responsibility that it's going to take. Even if it's like a thing you want to do and you love and you're excited about, it is that more like realistic discussion about the responsibility or the challenge that's there. So I don't know what I'm going to do my next rising sign video on yet, but I kind of think it's going to be just about this whole Sag Gemini axis because we've got a lot of action happening there. It's not just like one thing. It's not even just the mutual reception. It's also the lunation that's happening there. That's going to lead us into the full moon next month. So I think I might do it on that, but not sure yet. Let me do last call. Any final transits or happenings that I skipped over, didn't get to? Thank you all. Great comments. Yeah. What is the 12th? The 12th is your birthday. So that means, let's look at it really quick. Oops, wrong way. What did I say about the 12th? Oh, I forgot. Oh, yeah. That's that first Mercury, right? Is that it? Yeah. So see, okay. Because birthday is one thing. Sometimes the solar return chart actually is like a different day. Like it's the day before, or the day after. Like look up your solar return chart and that might be a little different, but just check to see, is Mercury at 1242 or is it past that? Because if Mercury is already separating, even by the arc minute, that can tell us a bit more about your year ahead. And we can say, okay, Saturn, especially as the year progresses, I might extrapolate that influence would be less and less and less. Versus if Mercury is applying to Saturn, then it's like, yeah, it might be a louder thing for the year. So see if Mercury is applying or separating in your solar return chart. It could go either way. Um, and then, of course, I guess one other thing while we're talking about it, when I'm looking for mitigations in a solar return chart, one of the things I really like to look at is the moon and who the moon's next aspect is, because that is going to flavor things very heavily. Who is the moon about to have a conversation with in your solar return chart? That might flavor things pretty heavily too. So good luck. I hope it's an okay chart. Yeah, thank you, Reverend Kai. Thank you for the contributions. Thank you for everyone's contributions. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. Do I have any other announcements? Is there anything else? Did I forget anything? Let me check. Yeah, hit the like button. hit the subscribe button, please. If you found this helpful, if you enjoyed this, if you like my style of reading, hit the like, hit the subscribe, book a reading. If it's too expensive, I have a sliding scale. I have discounts. Sign up for the newsletter. I think that's all I have. Yeah, if you're part of Chris Brennan's class, we're still doing the reading of Hellenistic astrology, the study of fate and fortune. We're finally on chapter 9. So we're really into the stuff now. We're past some of the major history chunks and we're much more onto like the doctrine practice details. So that's been really fun. Me and Melissa Marklin have been doing that. I'm doing this every month. I have my next question response time. That's going to be on the 14th of November at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here, same place. And yeah, watch out for the next rising sign horoscopes. And if you have any questions, email me, aligninglighastro@gmail.com, or you can comment below. If you have any anecdotes, please feel free to share them. If anything that I'm saying is resonating and you're like, oh, this is how it's showing up, I always love to hear those. So definitely throw that in the comments below. And yeah, just thank everyone else for coming and making it really fun in real time. I really appreciate everyone. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll see y'all around the internet. I'm on Threads. It's like Twitter light. Threads. I'm not really on Instagram. I'm barely on Instagram. I just throw my announcements up on there. But yeah, you can definitely find me on Threads in between. And you can send me DMs in Instagram, but it'll be like 10 to 30 to maybe 90 days before I find it. So it's not reliable at all. Okay. Take care, everyone. Have a good month of November. Oh, last thing. I don't know why I should have mentioned it earlier, but like, and I did mention it in the last month's forecast. Halloween weather is just like not, it's just not. Uh I don't love it. It really highlights this Mars Pluto opposition. It's highlighting new moon energy, which is fine for like, especially if you're doing more like solemn, um, quiet, more internally reflective types of holiday ritual around this time. It's actually kind of perfect for that. Or if you're trying to connect with ancestors in a really powerful way, great for that. But for like you're kind of uh you know, throwing candy out to children, um, that like the fun kind of raucous kind of interpretation of these times of the year in some parts of the world, it's less great for that. This is, keep an eye on your kids. Don't want to scare anyone at all, but this is what I would be doing if it were I were around, my nibblings. I'd just be like, looking over them and keeping an eye on them. And the energy is a little lower. So it's kind of like, if you're having a party or something Thursday night, it might be kind of a slow uptake or people might be a little slower energy. So just be prepared for that. People might be much more into just like eating and talking. And, there's not as much like playfulness in the air. I know we do have Venus here and Jupiter, so they're going to help with that. But like the moon cannot see either Venus or Jupiter on this day, on the 31st. So I'm a little bit more hopeful for like, Sunday, a Sunday party could work. Uh, Even like late on the 2nd, once the moon is getting past some things. But yeah, I don't love the 31st, the Halloween proper. And in fact, this weekend, I'm kind of hoping like this looked like the fun weekend to kind of party because we've got a fire moon, not really engaged with that intensity anymore. We are going to get a square with Saturn here pretty soon. I talked about it last month, but just want to remind people about that, being we are having holidays coming up. Okay, that's my last thing. Thanks again, everybody. 20 seconds.